Let's get into some game action, though. We do have a midweek match that we have to recap for everyone before we go ahead and make our previews and our picks for the upcoming weekend slate of games. There was one midweek match. We had Houston Dash taking on Gotham FC. Houston picking up another win here. 2-1 over Houston. Goals from Ebony Salmon, Marissa Vigiano. McCall Zerboni getting on the board for Gotham FC, but just wasn't enough in this one. Gotham picking up another loss.
This for poor Gotham, right? Like coming into this match, but frankly, I don't think it's that surprising what we saw from this side, and I don't know, the fact that they can't pick up wins, but we saw for the first time, because although Hugh Menzies, the new interim head coach for Gotham, stepped in last weekend, he's taking more passive role for Gotham. This time, this game out against Houston, a much more hands-on approach to this game. And I think it showed, because up until this point, Gotham has been a team that sits back, is very defensive, and frankly not that great in their defensive efforts because it's very individualized defense. Last night we saw a Gotham team that played as 11 players on the pitch and one unit, which we have not seen that at all this season. They defensively were very good 1v1 defenders, and then we're combining as a unit. We saw possession in the midfield between Cujo, Mewis, Zerboni. I think Cujo did a fantastic job of being that pivot player to switch the point of attack. There was so much more patience in keeping possession of the ball, finding the open player, passing it around. And then when you look up top at Smith, Purce, Sanamanu, at those players that were looking to create opportunities, I mean, it was just a much more well-rounded game from Gotham than we've seen in a very, very, very long time. On the other side, what? Give me some thoughts.
I would say maybe in the second half. I would say like it took both of these teams. It felt like in the first half that this was going to get real midweeky really quickly, if that makes any sense, for lack of a better word. I thought that the first half of this game it took a while to get going. It was a little physical, a little choppy for me. But I'm with you in terms of it looking a little bit different for not just Gotham, maybe both teams, obviously into the second half.
I think both teams as well. But like the fact that if you take Gotham's last 5 games, they didn't play anywhere like this team we saw last night in those last 5 games. There was so much more cohesion from this team. And Hugh Menzies saying that one of the biggest things he did was tell this team that they are good and talented and they're worth it. And like sometimes just hearing that from a different person that hasn't been there for a long time, coming into a program to say like, you are very talented players, you are a good team, let's put it all together, is what a player needs as a little bit of a shakeup. It's almost a different perspective. It's not the same person saying, hey, we got it next week, let's go. It's someone new coming in. On the other side of it, though, Houston Dash, this is a team that's on a bit of a tear. I mean, Ebony Salmon, holy cow, like how is she constantly doing this, scoring all of these goals? It's so fun to watch her. She's so excited. This is another great goal. She creates something out of absolutely nothing. Salmon creates this goal scoring opportunity for Houston in this match, and it really was the best of it. It kicked everything off for Houston. 73rd minute, she gets this goal, and then Marissa Vigiano with a beautiful strike. Just 3 minutes later, it was like bam, bam, bam for Houston. And then after this, it Zerboni gets one, which was also a great goal, and Gotham fighting back to get in this one. But there's one thing we've got to talk about in this match. Midge Purce.
Well, before we get there, I mean, I want to touch on Ebony Salmon really quickly. We're just watching an incredible second half of the season performance, like in real time. Every time Salmon scores a goal or like provides a different attacking look for Houston, I'm just like, what went so wrong in Louisville that this player got moved and we're watching her tear it up with a completely different team and a different style, right? And we're talking like making the Golden Boot race a little bit more interesting as the season kind of enters, not even just second half, but like the final third. of its season. 7 goals in 5 games. That's like a madness. Ebony Salmon is out there pulling off a madness like every game. So I think the timing in which this goal happens, I think, is also very important, because it's sort of dipping into areas where you're like, is this going to end up being one of those type of midweek matches where again it kind of like it ends in a draw, and on top of that possibly a scoreless draw. But yeah, shout out to another strong individual performance from this player. But I think maybe we can transition that into the point that you're trying to get to in this game, where sometimes you have like individual performances impact a game, even though it's a team sport. And then for Gotham's side, they had a player removed from a game, and then it sort of felt like it also impacted Gotham's game a little bit as well. And we're just above the hour mark, right? Before there's any goals this game, there is a free kick scenario that comes into play. And as Houston is going to take this free kick, Midge Purce is involved in a call and is issued a second yellow, which results in a red and a send off for approaching. And I think maybe the reaction on the pitch kind of set some things in motion, perhaps because we saw Anumanu also receive a yellow for dissent on that. There was a lot coming out of Gotham in terms of the body language and the reaction to a call like that. What were some of your reactions as you were kind of watching in real time?
I think it's a way for a referee, Alex Beltier, to get a game under control for sure. I mean, so the fact that Purce already had a yellow card in the match, in terms of like the officiating perspective, that person is already on thin ice in the referee's eyes, in what they're doing. And as a player, you need to be smart and understand that you're already sitting on a yellow. So any nefarious foul that you make is potentially going to be a yellow just because you're already sitting on one. It like increases the aspect that you're going to get another one. Now, if Purce didn't have a first yellow card and she encroached on a free kick, I think it maybe would have been a card still in that sense, because you can't do that. You can't walk up to someone about to take a free kick and stop them from doing that by being 3 yards, 4 yards from them.
Yeah.
So the fact that she was already on a yellow made it an immediate yellow as soon as this happened. Then the fact that Anumanu gets a yellow for dissent and conversing after this card, that's something that was a little shocking to me. But I also don't know what Anumanu said. But from the broadcaster's perspective and from watching this game, there was like 5 Gotham players around the official. So Anumanu must have said something that didn't sit well, because then she ends up getting a yellow. But honestly, it's like a bad call for Midge Purce. What was she thinking? That's what I think. I'm like, you need to be a smarter player in order to know where you are in the game. You're in the 60th minute. You're already sitting on a yellow card. This kick was not like 1 yard outside of the 18, right? It was just over halfway. It's not like they're about to score and you're like, hey, I'm going to take one for the team. And
the positioning of it was like really.
Yeah, I don't think it was necessary for Purce to step in front of the ball and try to block this, slow down the play at all.
Yeah, it's I just think it just kind of like goes in line maybe a little bit with like just kind of Gotham's season to date, quite frankly. It's like I think people's reaction to it probably comes from the fact that it sort of bleeds into those arguments that people try to make week in and week out about officiating in the league. And I'm someone who's gonna be far less critical of officiating when they actually make the call versus when they don't make the call. So I'm like, okay, well, they saw that happening. She was already on a yellow, and it's a call that we don't often see made in NWSL, but that doesn't mean that once it's called, there's going to be like a lot of like chaos around it. So I think that perhaps that's probably some of the energy in that. It's similar to when perhaps an official doesn't give the yellow as often for keepers who time waste a lot, right? There's also a lot of freak out about that when the official actually issues the yellow about that. So it's like there's this kind of like nitpicky picking and choosing about like when to want to be critical of refs versus like wanting to let things slide. I think it's just like more gasoline to the fire of this actual subject, but when it got called in real time, I was just kind of like, oh, can't do that. It's also like a choice. Like you mentioned a really good point about where the positioning on the field that this free kick took place.
Yeah.
Don't try to play games in that moment, especially when like Houston's likely not going to, find themselves in a really, really good opportunity off of this particular set piece, right? So I think you've got, at this point in the game, you've got one of your better players on the team sent off, and now this player is going to be unavailable for the next game. So I think, obviously it goes without saying, Gotham FC is a better team when Margaret Purce is on the pitch for them, but she wasn't for the remainder of this half, and will now not be with them for, I believe, the game against Orlando Pride is their next one coming up. So it's also, again, like, it's also the timing in which this happens. Like sometimes like you get a player sent off and perhaps it opens things up a little bit differently, and teams get different looks because they're forced to kind of make some adjustments. And I think we did see that a little bit from Gotham. But again, it's just one of these things where it was just little too late. And I think even with this goal from Viggiano specifically, you just sort of saw this. It was kind of like a clear, more of a defensive breakdown for me, versus like a moment of brilliance from Viggiano. I mean, she is someone that I think has been having a very quiet, successful season with Houston. She's not someone that I think people are looking at and saying, this is a player that has been absolutely integral to Houston's success. But when you're looking at her and her time on the pitch with this team, she is. The Sophie Schmidts of it all, I think, are going to be, the focal point and stuff like that. But Viggiano has been this type of player additionally in the midfield to kind of give different options for the Dash. So, getting the go-ahead goal when you're up against a team that's already down in general in the standings and maybe mentally, and then on top of that, down a player within a game, you're just watching this game and you're like, there's no way they're going to come back from this, right?
But then they end up getting a goal, right? McCall Zerboni gets one.
It's the little things, I guess. It's the little things.
Gotta find the silver lining. But after Purce goes out, Menzies has to make a slew of changes. Right now, at this point, you're down a player. Yes, it's a forward. It's not your center back, so things don't have to shift that much. But 3 changes happen. This is now the second time in 2 games that Houston is against an opponent that's playing down a player. And last time against Racing Louisville, they couldn't close it out. That game ends in a draw. This time they still concede a goal. Like I'm nitpicking here, but Houston, you can't concede a goal when you're up a player. Score 2, you got to hold that shutout, right? Like those are integral points that Houston needs, especially towards the end of this regular season when they're at the top of the standings. They're tied with Portland, but goal differential comes down to being one of the tiebreakers. And if you're pushed out of, say, 3rd place into 4th, or 5th into 6th, or 6th into 7th, it comes down to goal differential. So that's something that I bet Houston's not too happy about, that they conceded a goal late in this one. But hey, these teams, they're back at it again this weekend. So we'll see.